Solitary confinement, which I believe is torture. John Oliver is going to talk about it while I go pee real quick, and I'll be back in a second.
Our main story tonight concerns solitary confinement, a punishment inflicted on prisoners, pet goldfish, and, of course, Lance Armstrong's remaining testicle. It's in there all by itself. It must be so lonely. Most of us have a general idea of what solitary confinement is, although as this TikTok man on the street interview demonstrates, others seem a little unsure.
In solitary confinement, how many prisoners are in each cell?
One.
Wait.
That means he's alone, right?
Yeah,
it's alone.
yeah.
One. It's gotta be one.
I'm gonna go with one.
One answer.
Yeah, that's right.
OK. I'm glad they got it right, but it did take them an alarming amount of time to triple-team that answer. Although, it did also give me a chance to absorb every weird fashion choice there, because you'd think the boldest one would be this kid wearing light blue Crocs with a Virginity Rocks T-shirt, but then you'd be ignoring that this one is wearing hashtag shoes. This one's outfit is somehow both too formal and too casual, and this one seemingly couldn't decide if he was dressing for the pool or golf, so decided on both. Very basically, every one of these human red Solo cups is dressed inexcusably wrong in their own unique way. I'm genuinely glad they all found each other, and I hope to never meet any of them under any circumstances. The point is, solitary confinement is a common enough practice that even those bros basically know about it. And the fact is, in this country, facilities from jails and prisons to immigration detention centres isolate a massive number of people. A 2016 government report found that on any given day, an estimated 90,000 inmates in prison and jail are housed in isolation. And that is almost certainly an undercount, given how poor data collection on this is. Yet for how widespread our use of solitary is, some of those in charge of our prison systems have been weirdly ignorant on the practicalities of it. Take this amazing exchange from 2014, where then Senator Al Franken asked the then head of the Federal Bureau of Prisons a pretty simple question.
How big is a cell? How big is the average cell in solitary?
Say the average size?
Cell, yeah, the size of the cell. How big is it? What is, I'm trying to get this is the human thing we're talking about. We've got a lot of statistics. How big is the cell?
The average size of a cell is, I guess I'm trying to find, you're looking for the space of what the...
Yes. The dimensions in feet, in inches. The size of the cell that a person is kept in. I want to get some idea of, I don't know, am I asking this wrong?
No, you are absolutely not. And honestly, I wish he'd kept going there. OK, clearly you're confused by feet and inches. How about metres or steps? You know, if you stood at one end of the cell, how many steps would it take to walk to the other end? No? How many rabbits could you fit on the floor of one of those cells? How many rabbits big is one cell? Am I asking this wrong? Because there are literally no other ways to ask this question. For the record, the average size of a solitary cell is 6 feet by 9 feet, which is way too small for a person to be stuck in for days, weeks, months, or even years on end. That level of isolation is why, in 2011, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture declared that considering the severe pain and suffering that solitary confinement can cause, it can amount to torture. They then called on all countries to prohibit indefinite and prolonged solitary confinement in excess of 15 days, which years on end. That level of isolation is why, in 2011, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture declared that considering the severe pain... For the record, the average size of a solitary cell is 6 feet by 9 feet.
We're just going to go with it.
Which is
Bucket.
way too small
YOLO.
for a person to be stuck in for days, weeks, months, or even years on end. That level of isolation is why, in 2011, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture...
Dude, shut up. I'm not going to desktop audio delay, man. That's not how that works, okay? That's not even a temporary solution. Please stop.
...declared that considering the severe pain and suffering that solitary confinement can cause, it can amount to torture. They then called on all countries to prohibit indefinite and prolonged solitary confinement in excess of 15 days, which really is not asking that much. But is also something that we in the US have, to put it mildly, not done, which is just appalling, as solitary really takes a toll on people, as someone who's actually experienced it can tell you.
Ask yourself, can you live in a bathroom for 10 years? It's bad to lock an individual up and just put them in a in a room.
Please be a real socialist and a democratic socialist and get our 1 minute ad break back. Don't worry, you're about to get hit with a 1 minute ad break right now in the middle of the fucking hour. So there you go.
Closed, nothing to do. It's I guess you could say inhumane. And I know that we're inmates and all you're inmates, but excuse my language, it fucks me up.
Yeah, of course it fucks you up. Human beings are not meant to sit in a bathroom for 10 years with nothing to do. You're thinking of retainers. Those are the things that we place into a bathroom and fully neglect for an entire decade. Everybody knows that. So given how prevalent it is and how damaging it can be, tonight, let's look at solitary confinement. And let's start with the fact that it has its roots in a somewhat unexpected place.
It was actually introduced by the Quakers as a noble experiment in rehabilitation. There was a belief that you could put a prisoner in his own solitary cell, freed from the evil influences of modern...
Bro, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know this. And I talk about prisoner rights all the fucking time. I did not know that the original inception of solitary confinement came down from Quakers. I thought it was just straight torture. I thought it was like medieval torture. And this was just another version of that.
Society. And if you put them in that cell, they would become like a penitent monk, free to come close to God and to their own inner being, and they would naturally heal.
It's true, the whole idea of solitary came from Quakers. And on one hand, it is not surprising that a form of brutal torture and punishment was invented by a religious group. But on the other, if you gave me 50 guesses for which one invented locking people in a small room alone to feel guilty 24 hours a day, I'd have guessed Catholics 50 times in a row. Quakers basically thought that prisoners isolated in cells with a Bible could use that time to reflect, repent, and eventually reform. That is even where the term penitentiary originated, which is a handy fun fact if you ever want to quickly raise a few red flags on a first date. But by the mid-1800s, the psychological harms of isolation were becoming clear, and by 1890, the Supreme Court declared that solitary confinement made prisoners, quote, violently insane. After that, the practice was largely abandoned until the 1980s, when mass incarceration led to prison overcrowding, which in turn led to a rise in prison violence, and in an effort to preserve order, prison officials started ramping up the use of solitary again. And at this point, it is worth looking at what modern solitary actually consists of. Generally, it involves isolating people for 22 to 24 hours per day in small cells with minimal contact with others and with little or no access to reading materials or radio and TV. And even if that is pretty much what you assumed, there are additional elements to solitary that you might not expect, like the fact that some cells are lit around the clock and that there can be a near constant sound of banging, screaming and moaning. Frontline spent 4 months filming in a solitary confinement unit and released a video just of the noise.
This is, by the way, this is the reason why Norway has a no extradition policy to the United States of America. If you're a United States American criminal, okay, and the government asks you, you made your way to Norway, the government asks, please extradite this criminal to the United States of America. Norway believes that it is a human rights violation to extradite prisoners to the United States of America because the conditions are torturous.
And here is just 20 seconds of it.
Good question on why Snowden isn't in Norway. I didn't say all prisoners, okay? Jesus fucking Christ.
Holy shit! How are you supposed to think in there, let alone sleep? There is a reason people fall asleep to sounds of the rainforest and not sounds of one of those haunted houses where you have to sign a waiver to get in. So a person can be stuck alone in a cell for 23 hours a day or more with the soundtrack to Stomp playing in the background. And as this man will tell you, filling that time can take some real effort.
One of the things I did in solitary to pass the time was save my bread, put it on the floor, and let the mice come in and eat it and play. It was action. It was something different. Is it gross? Yeah. Disgusting? A little bit? Sure. Better than going insane? Yeah.
Right. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because it is a little disgusting, but it is better than going insane. Also, for what it's worth, I don't think I understand what TikTok is. I thought I did, but I clearly don't. I thought it was an app for teens to do the same 8 dance moves that all involve this move. so that the Chinese government can spy on us. I didn't know that frank discussions of the conditions of prisons were part of it too. But that guy...
That actually nails the good and the evil of TikTok altogether. I was talking about this last night. This is a random note, and it's completely fucking unrelated to the thing, but what were we talking about? Oh, I was telling Schlatt about how the average TikToker, like because of TikTok and because of social media, the average American person has basically become like a medieval peasant believing in ice trolls and whatnot. I gave credit to Felix for that take. Okay? Where basically like people believe in hexes, people believe in fucking ice trolls, all this shit, right? And that's the worst of TikTok. And then also, simultaneously, you have the best of TikTok, which is this. People explaining their frank experiences with how fucking the carceral state is geared around torturing people. Or even like that guy that I love watching who goes into the Everglades without shoes on. I've seen some of the greatest things I've ever seen on TikTok and some of the most unhinged schizophrenic takes I've ever seen on TikTok. What the fuck? XQCL has a Kabe? What the hell is this? Is that for Ramadan? Please explain the Everglades guy. Everglades shoeless TikTok. Here. What's the account? Does anyone have it? Fishing Garrett. Okay. After this, you should cover the Khalif Browder story. It's directly related. Brother, I've talked about Khalif Browder probably 1,000 times on this broadcast. You're right, though. It is directly related. This guy, I love him.
Fucking barefoot in the Florida Everglades. You always gotta watch your step. Could be a big old lizard right next to you. Saw me and whipped around, and I can see the fear in his eyes. I love you, buddy. He ended up taking off like a rocket ship. Then later, I found this cottonmouth. This thing is a stud. Look how fat he is. He's on a dirt road, so I'm gonna move him so nobody runs him over. See you later, chunky boy. Well, what do we have here? Yoink. It's a day gecko. I love these guys so much. He ended up taking a dump on me, but it's all good. This tokay gecko doesn't know what's coming for him. Gave him the old reach around. Didn't even see it coming. He ended up cussing me out. He's not very happy with me. Their bite definitely packs a punch, and he got his revenge. He is letting me have it, barking every second. This one was very vocal. Check out these stud tokay geckos. Guys, I'm going to be posting some bangers soon. You're not going to want to miss them.
I fucking love this guy. Apparently, Ethan had him on. Anyway, that kind of shit is extremely my shit. He's dope as hell. Like, he's barefoot in the Everglades. I don't know how else to describe it.
Wasn't kidding there. Solitary can irreparably damage people's minds. Studies show that some lasting mental damage is caused after just a few days of isolation. And the effects can be even more acute when children experience it. Oh yeah, in case I forgot to mention, we subject children to solitary in this country too.
Vicky Reed was shocked by what we found at the Middle Tennessee Juvenile Detention Facility in Murray County. We revealed juveniles often spend 23 to 24 hours a day locked inside their cells.
If a parent locks their kid in a closet and leaves them there
it's terrifying.
And feeds them 3 times a day.
That's how you have Damien. That's literally like, that's Omen, dude. That's straight up. That's how you have devil children. I'm not even kidding. That's how you make them.
We would call that child abuse.
Yeah, she's not wrong. If I learned that someone was locking children in a closet all day long, I'd immediately say 2 things. Are those the children from the Cars for Kids commercial? If so, thank you for your service. But if not, then that is child abuse and you need to stop doing it immediately. So if it is this torturous and this permanently damaging, why do we put people in solitary? Well, if you ask prison or government officials, the response that you'll often get is, we actually don't. And that is because we have a lot of euphemisms for solitary, like segregation or protective custody, or referring to the cells as restricted housing units or security housing units. In Tennessee, where that woman was outraged that kids were being held in isolation, officials there simply called it room restriction. And here is New York Mayor Eric Adams trying to make a similar type of semantic distinction.
I am opposed to solitary confinement. That is a draconian way to protect the city. But what I am saying, you can't be an inmate, sexually assault a correction officer or another inmate, and then stay in general population. Punitive segregation is a humane way of removing danger.
I hate solitary confinement, except here's why I love it. Here's why it's extremely my shit, okay? It's humane. Here's why I hate it, but it's humane. Why do you hate it then if it's so fucking humane, dude?
Dangerous inmates to a location where they can get the services they need so they can stop preying on other inmates, staff, and preying on society.
Yeah, Adams doesn't support solitary confinement, but he's all in for punitive segregation. An interesting distinction considering that the New York Board of Corrections' own website says that punitive segregation is also known as solitary confinement. So that's a pretty weird stance to take, although it probably shouldn't be surprising that Eric Adams did or said something weird. This is the same man who once told a reporter that New York sits on a store of rare gems and stones, which is why there's a special...
Once a cop, always a cop, baby. That's cop behavior right there. Like, it's funny because, like, when cops become, like, civilian-facing, which, I mean, police are always supposed to be civilian-facing public servants, but when they actually get into a position where they have to say things that people agree with because they have to be elected to that position or whatever like that, or when their job revolves around almost exclusively communicating with the broader civilian population, you immediately recognize how unhinged fascist they are, okay? Not the gemstones and crystal daddy shit, but like when he talks about, you know, what to do with criminals and how to solve crime, it is an absolutely unhinged thing to say, like he just described.
Energy that comes from here, insisted on taking his first paycheck as mayor in crypto, deliberately posed for this photo, and has repeatedly held up a sponge on stage to encourage people to wring out their internal despair, answering the question, what if Mr. Clean was a motivational speaker? But the fact is, whatever you call solitary, the experience for the person going through it is the same. And corrections officers...
Eric Adams also may or may not be involved in a polycule.
Use of it by arguing, as Adams just did, that it is a necessary tool to isolate wrongdoers and preserve order. Here is the head of the New York City Corrections Officers Union making that exact point.
We have to be able to segregate those people because, you know, if we have a society without consequences, then we'll just have total anarchy.
Isn't the problem that many of those in solitary are not the really dangerous criminals? They're people who've broken minor rules or are suicidal?
That's just not the case. Minor infractions, people do not end up in punitive segregation.
Oh, first, good catch. You almost called it solitary confinement there. A near miss on par with having a mustache that almost makes you look like a John Waters impersonator. But the second, the claim that people don't end up in solitary for minor infractions is just not true. In general, researchers have found that violence is typically not the most common reason.
He is not beating the fucking ghoul allegations, dude. He just, what the fuck is that look, dude? He just looks like Voldemort, but drew on a mustache. He looks like new Vince McMahon. Have you guys seen this? The absolute insane new rendition of Vince McMahon? What the ever-loving fuck is this? Explain this to me. Why? What the hell is going on? It's also weird because, like, he just looks like kind of a different person. Like he no longer looks white, kind of. He looks Italian. I genuinely don't know how this happened. Like the same guy, Vince McMahon, also Vince McMahon. It's like a toothpick changes everything, but this is the reverse of that. Yeah, I saw the Stabby Baby tweet. Bold choice to go with this look when you want people to forget you're a rapist. What? His face grew, and I think it's Botox. I don't really know what's going on. Like, all right, let's continue.
People are sent to solitary. In Oregon, researchers once found that disobedience was the infraction resulting in the most solitary confinement sanctions. And nationwide, people who were sent to solitary for reasons including, and these are all real, not making their bed, using Facebook, and having too many envelopes. And as this formerly incarcerated man will tell you, the list does not stop there.
I've seen people go to solitary for things as little as handing other people stuff, having too many cigarettes in their pockets. I've seen people go to solitary for talking back. I've seen people go to solitary for not having their shirt tucked in. I've seen people go to solitary for not having the right shoes in the gym. I've seen people go to the box for a lot of stuff, bro.
That is ridiculous. Solitary should not be where we send people who are dressing incorrectly. If it were, I can think of 4 people who'd be in there right now, yet instead they're walking around free, struggling to answer basic questions. So the truth is, petty rule infractions are a very common cause of landing people in solitary, and that is not all. People who are seen as at risk in the general prison population because they are young, mentally ill, intellectually disabled, gay or transgender can wind up in there for their own protection. And think how absurd That logic is the only way we can keep you safe is to inflict enormous harm on you. It's like arguing the only way to keep you hydrated is to waterboard you. One, it isn't, so two, find another fucking way. And if you're thinking, well, what if someone actually is a potential threat to inmates or guards? Shouldn't they then be getting locked up in solitary? Well, you should know that a 2016 report found that there is little evidence that administrative segregation has had any effects on overall levels of violence.
But that's not what it's done for anyway. It's done to just like further torture and dehumanize prisoners. Just like every part of the prison system is basically designed in the same way with the same exact purpose. That's it.
In correctional facilities. In fact, some researchers found subjecting people to solitary can lead them to become more, not less violent. And that can obviously be a problem, not just inside prisons, but also after people are released. Even those who have worked within prisons, like this former warden, will tell you just how counterproductive our current system is.
If I have somebody that comes in with a 5-year commitment, you can have them do their whole time in segregation, but I don't want them living next to me when you release them. The reality is 80% of these inmates are going to be hitting the street. Okay, so we can either make them worse, okay, and create more victims when they go on the street, or we can rehabilitate them.
Right. And when you frame it as a choice like that, it is hard to pick solitary confinement. It's like saying, for dinner tonight, we can either get pizza or we could assassinate Paul McCartney. One of those choices makes sense, and the other is absolutely horrible for everyone on Earth. And just to be clear, this isn't to say that people who've committed violent acts in prison should just be left in the general population to potentially harm others. They can be separated without being completely isolated. Take North Dakota. Their state prison officials made the bold decision to end the use of solitary there, but in doing so, to also create a less hostile atmosphere overall. So when prisoners got in trouble for serious infractions like violence, instead of solitary, they were sent to a brand new unit where they'd get significant out-of-cell time and access to behavioural treatment. And it has had promising results.
Jerry Holmes was just released from the new Behavioral Health Intervention Unit, or BIU, in September.
Mindset. When people's immediate reaction is solitary confinement for minor infractions should never happen, but some prisoners like child murderers with life sentences deserve the torture of solitary confinement and worse, what you're failing to recognize is you're literally justifying the system. Because solitary confinement started off with that, okay? I mean, or in its original application, it was for people who were like, you know, doing the worst fucking crimes or whatever. And it's continuation of that structure. It's continuation. The usage continuation is justified through the edge cases that you bring up. There is still plenty of instances where there's wrongful convictions, which means that is wholeheartedly unhinged. Similar principle to capital punishment. But also, what you're describing is vengeance. It's not justice. Justice, as I say all the time, is supposed to be about ensuring that a crime doesn't happen ever again. This violent action doesn't happen ever again. A part of that comes with restitution and rehabilitation. Rehabilitation implies that no matter how awful a crime is, that the perfect solution is about the perfect solution revolves around ensuring that person never commits this crime again. The punitive focus in our criminal justice system is the reason why we have such a problem with crime in this country. Who draws the line on what crime deserves the harshest punishment? Well, you can't. That's precisely why solitary confinement is utilized in this way. That's the whole point. Violence to the perpetrator of violence does not solve anything. It doesn't even help heal the person who was a victim to said violence.
100% better. Because you're just not crammed up in a hole like, coming out of the box.
Brandon Davis has spent time in the old Administrative Segregation Unit, or ASU, and the new BIU. He says the biggest difference is just having someone to talk to. Now they have interaction and counseling to work toward a solution.
Because if you bottle in your issues, it overwhelms the person. Like, cause I have my own problems. And like when you're isolated and you have these issues, and it's like you have nowhere to release them or no one to talk to them about.
Of course. You don't have to have been in solitary to understand that talking through your issues with other people is probably better for you than being locked up in a concrete toilet cave. And look, I'm not saying that any of this is easy, because I know that the solution should be simple here. Putting people in solitary is torture, so let's stop doing it. But exactly how we do that is absolutely critical to any reform actually working. Unfortunately, in multiple states, when they've taken steps to limit the use of solitary, corrections officials have found ways around them by doing things like keeping prisoners isolated for just below the threshold set by the state, or creating even more euphemisms to camouflage the practice. One key reason that North Dakota's reforms worked is because they came directly from people running the correction system there. They understood that reducing the use of solitary required a shift in the whole culture of their prisons. And they did have to get rid of staff who weren't on board with the idea so that it could be executed properly. And while it was not easy, there was an initial rise in violence in the prison's general population immediately afterward, they stuck with it. And not only has the overall trend in violence been downward, but both incarcerated persons and staff members reported improvements in their health and well-being, better interactions with one another, and less exposure to violence following the reforms. So it can be done if we want to. And I know that some corrections officials will still insist that they need...
There's also a huge gang issue in prisons. We got to find solutions to address that in order to create a safe environment for rehabilitation. Yeah, again, if the conditions of prison is bedlam, where they literally simply have the gangs control damn near the entirety of the prison in order to create like some level of organization, you're not going to be able to do that. People often forget, and this is due to deliberate propaganda dehumanizing prisoners in this country in order to justify our carceral state, which also has a profit incentive baked into it because capitalism. But people often forget that prisoners are humans. They're just like you and I. Some of them are horrible monsters, sure, but a lot of them are just human beings that are responding to stimuli, okay? They are obviously unable to escape their material conditions. Now, once they're in prison, that reality doesn't change magically. So if you behave like these people are no longer people, their personhood has been taken from them, okay? If you act like that's gone and you treat them like this, well, they're going to be more violent and integration is going to be impossible. That's why I have a lot of respect for people who have gone through the prison system and are normal humans that have been able to reintegrate into society. Like, friend of the show, Jeff Woodek, that comes to mind immediately. Surviving Los Angeles County Jail is no simple feat, in my opinion. Now, that's why I let him cut my hair, even though he has one eye. All jokes aside, a person that has opportunity, a person that has but all of their immediate needs met for humanity is not going to go out and steal Kias, right? Little kid who has school and after school programs and a future, an economic future, and perhaps even a crumb of upward social mobility carved out for them, not going to go out of their way to do crimes. Okay? Or even if people with positive futures engage in crime, society rarely ever treats that as the same kind of crime that a black kid does when they're growing up in the hood. Same principle stands in prison as well. If you offer people in prison opportunity, if you offer people in prison humanity, then the likelihood that they will continue doing crimes when they get out into open society, free society, diminishes. There is really good evidence for this reality. When you look at recidivism rates in other countries, this is a bit of a meme at this point, but other countries like Norway, the entire purpose of the criminal justice system is not to make people suffer, okay? That's why they call it a correctional facility. The purpose of a criminal justice system is to keep the rate of crime low. But when you're focusing on punitive, vengeance-based injustice that you consider to be justice, all you do is create more criminals. Or you make the existing people that have done a crime become more rugged criminals. In order to survive in the current carceral state, you literally have to do more crime. In order to survive in the prisons, in most prisons especially, I can't speak for all prisons, but in a lot of prisons, you have to literally join a gang. That's it. It's like your only mechanism of survival. And when you join a gang, you have to do shit that is more criminal. That's the only way that you can survive prison. You have to join a gang and then do crimes. It's insane. The only reason why gangs exist in prison is for this purpose. That's bullshit. No, not gangs in the same okay. Motherfuckers that literally went and did a brief stint in a federal prison for like 30 days are going to come at me now and be like, that's not true, bro. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? I know motherfuckers that were locked up for insider trading, and I know motherfuckers that were locked up in county jails for, you know, worse shit. If bad conditions in prison and jailing worked, the USA wouldn't have so much crime. Exactly. Anyway, let's continue.
Solitary, but I would argue that if you find yourself making the case that you need to torture people to keep your facility safe, that in itself is an admission of catastrophic failure, and you may need to go. Because it is important to remember just how lasting the damage here can be. The voices in this debate are often dominated by corrections officials, but it is worth listening at length to the people who've been harmed by this. Anthony Graves was kept in solitary for 18 years after being wrongly convicted. And just listen to him testify before Congress about what it did to him.
I have been free for almost 2 years, and I still cry at night because no one out here can relate to what I've gone through. I battle with these feelings of loneliness. I've tried therapy, but it didn't work. The therapist was crying more than me. She could not imagine how inhumanely our system was treating people. I haven't had a good night's sleep since I've been out. I only sleep about 2.5 to 3 hours a night, and then I'm up. My body has not made the adjustment. I have mood swings that just causes emotional breakdowns. I don't know where they come from. They just come out of nowhere. Solitary confinement makes our criminal justice system criminal.
He's right. Solitary isn't something we do to people behind bars. It's
he was innocent and locked in solitary confinement for 18 years.
Something we do to them forever. And it needs to be universally understood how utterly indefensible it is. So that maybe, just maybe, one day in the future, we can get to a point where even if you approached the worst dressed bros on the street of any American city and asked them what is the acceptable number of people to have in solitary confinement, the answer they come up with no hesitation is fucking 0.
Yep, it's a human rights violation through and through. But of course, nobody gives a shit because we have dehumanized prisoners in this country who make it seem like if you are convicted of a crime, you don't deserve any rights whatsoever. And that attitude is reinforced through every facet of society, through every facet of existence. That's it. There's no way to fix that problem. And even in an understanding, empathetic community such as this one, this subject matter comes up regularly and people fucking pop off with immediately, like the immediate counters of, oh, what if it was your mom that was raped? Like, wouldn't you want the person to go to perma-jail and get fucking destroyed and all this shit? What if it happened to you? And it's like, it's revenge brain. I shouldn't make legislative decisions on my own personal anger that I feel. That's not how it's supposed to work. You know what I mean? Like, that's insane. And there's a real reason for why this revenge-based reactionary sentiment is so powerful in America. And the real reason is actually more nefarious, I guess. It's to justify slavery. When you have successfully depersonalized, dehumanized criminals across the board by pointing to some of the worst aspects, by pointing to some of the worst criminals to justify all matter of torture that they are subjected to, you create a process where, you know, a living, breathing, existing plantation like Angola can continue using the same name, operate in the exact same way as it once did, and no one bats a fucking eye. I am, of course, referring to Angola, which happens to be the plantation turned into the Louisiana State Penitentiary. The plantation was also called Angola. I think you guys understand why the plantation was called Angola, right? Anyway, if someone, but you're right. If someone did unspeakable things to me, I want them to get mental help and reform and never do it again. I never want to see them again, but not in a locked away forever in torture, just away from me in distance or something. Yeah. Said, I don't know. If your mom was raped, I think you wouldn't want a system that encourages people recommitting crimes. No, exactly. That person, I don't think this person is saying something that is against what I'm saying. Yeah, no, it comes across as contentious, but you're misunderstanding the point he's making. He's agreeing with me because currently the draconian punitive carceral structure is one that actually does encourage people to recommit crimes. The current carceral system encourages reoffense. Exactly. It makes rehabilitation impossible.